you like calling yourself a millennial? Do you like the term? I don't either. It's kind of like nobody calls me a baby boomer. I mean, or when they're doing a study, when they're like, okay, she's a baby boomer, or segmenting for marketing purposes or whatever. But so it's weird to me that we actually call millennials to their face all the time. It's very strange. We should treat them as individuals, but we don't. That's how society is moving, is to segmenting people into different groups. So, and some millennials do like it. And others don't. So the first thing I would say is figure out whether the millennials you meet and know and work with want to be called millennials or not, because you don't want to be putting marketing messaging out to millennials that contains the word millennials if they don't like that, right? So interesting concept of why all of a sudden we call this group something, and I mean, they called us, the baby boomer generation, but they don't market to us that way outright. You don't see it in ads. It doesn't say, hey, baby boomers, so it's strange. But in 2013, this segment of individuals surpassed the baby boomer segment in the labor force. So in 2013, there became more millennials working than baby boomers in the workforce. In 2015, so last year, this group surpassed the number of baby boomers on the planet. Holy cow, right? So there are now technically more millennials alive than baby boomers. And the baby boomers, here's another Debbie Downer fact. It would be like, Chris, don't bring her back. Those boomers are going to die in the 20 years, right? The majority of them are going to start to die, and most of us will be dead somewhere in the next 25 years, right? So we're living it up now, though. Party time. But truly, there are more millennials than there are baby boomers. I sat next to a professor at CU, and we started talking, and it was really funny because I don't normally talk on planes because I fly so much you never get anything done, or that's your time to sleep, or you just read a book, or you follow up on notes or whatever. So, but he was kind of a chatty guy, so I ended up talking to him, and he was a professor, and he taught a sales education class at CU. So because of my background, I've been in consulting and sales my whole career since I came out of college. And so he asked me if I would mentor a couple students. So for the last couple of years, I mentor a couple students every semester at CU. I don't know if you have any extra time or if you could do that, but what a gas. I mean, it is a very fun experience to work with these people. And sometimes they're men, sometimes they're women, young women. It just so happens right now I have 2 young women. And they could not be any more different than the same. Totally. I mean, it is just funny. So my first student, her name's Ella, and Ella is graduating in next April, end of April, beginning of May, and she has no idea what she's doing. She's in her 5th year, very bright young lady, so don't think it's because she's not a smart cookie. She's a very bright young lady. No idea, no prospect for a job, but I'm not quite sure that's because she hasn't started looking yet. Because she is employable, I would think, from hiring. I've worked for a $10 billion company, hired a lot of people, think she's employable, but she's still trying to decide what she's passionate about. 6 months before graduation. So she is. So we set up our thing. We set up our first call by email because I don't live in Boulder, so I set up our first call by email. So what do you think happened? Any guess? She didn't show up. First call, didn't show up. Okay. My second student, Jenna, she, I'm sure, was on that line 15 minutes before, right? Had sent me an outline of what we wanted to talk about, all those different things. Ella didn't show up. So how long will you guys wait for an appointment? Say it's a appointment with a customer, well, that's maybe a little different, but appointment with a vendor or somebody like that, and it's a phone call, how long will you wait? I'll wait 10 minutes. How long? 5. Ooh, good to know. Good to know. Right? 35 minutes later, Ella called me, and I answered the phone because I'm like, okay, this is my job, right? I'm her mentor. I'm supposed to help her see that you don't just show up. And plus, I was kind of curious, right? Like, what happened to her? Because she had picked the time. I didn't even pick the time. She picked the time. So I was like, okay, let's see what happens. So I'm like, hi, Ella. It's Chris. She says, oh, hi, Chris. I'm sorry I'm late for our appointment. And I was like, you know, Ella, you're pretty much late and almost over our appointment. I said, and I told her, I said, Ella, you know, professional people are busy and just common courtesy. I said, so I'm just curious, why are you late? And she said, well, I was at my job and my boss asked me to work another hour. And so I told her I would. And I said, okay, so do you not have a cell phone? Could you not have said, hello, boss, I have another commitment, but I'm sure she won't mind. I'll call her or text her. She's like, oh, I didn't think of that. Didn't think of that. Do you think her boss asked her? No way. She forgot about the phone call. I truly believe she forgot about the phone call, right? She had no idea. So millennials, and not that some of us don't do that as well, right? We've all forgotten one or two appointments, but to her, it didn't actually even faze her. And I'm part of her grade. So the first impression I had with her is that she really didn't maybe care about this mentorship or this class, right? So very interesting. Now, I've had 4 calls with her, and she's made on time to every call, which is good. And so by the second call, the third call, actually, she was sending me an agenda. I'm like, which is always helpful, so I know what we're going to talk about, and don't send it to me 5 minutes before, right? So millennials are a force that are in the labor workforce. They're a force in the financial services because the money is going to transfer to them, and we have to know how to reach them. So, good question, right? Will millennials be interested in banking with you? We all want them to bank with us, right? They have to. We have to have them. But what do you think? Do you think they want to bank with you? Just raise your hands. Look at that, $41 trillion running out the door of the embassy suites. Yeah, we've got to find a way, right? We've got to find a way to get them to bank with us and hopefully actually use our branches, right? But to do that, our service expectations have to change because their service expectations are changing. Their expectation is that you will bank them differently than you banked the baby boomer community, right? Some simple things, and Kelly had mentioned in her presentation as well, right? They're instant gratification people, they're tech-savvy people, tech-dependent people, right? So we have to change our service expectations. So let's look at an example about your branch and your frontline staff. So I'm going to go back to my bank. So in my community bank, I live in a small town, but there's a heavy influx of tourists in my town at all time. I live in a ski area. In Colorado, up in Summit County, I live in the Breckenridge, Keystone, Copper Mountain area. My husband's a fly fisher owner-operator, runs a small business in the town. And so we live there. We're blessed enough to live there, so I'm very happy. And we use a CPA for my husband's business. So we don't have a lot of crime in our city, but wouldn't you know it, somebody broke into our CPA's office. I don't even know maybe they thought there was like people bring their account a whole bunch of cash or something. I don't know, what could you possibly get out of a CPA office? But come to find out, there was something there that they could get and they did get. So our CPA makes our quarterly payments, our quarterly tax payments to the IRS. And they do that for a lot of their clients. So he had a list of all of our account numbers. Yeah, dang it, right? And that's what they took. Not only ours, like there must have been 75 clients. So all of our accounts basically should be changed and could be compromised, right? So I, unfortunately, got the job of getting our accounts transferred over, which turned out to be a great experience because I love my bank, right? So I called up Emily, And I told her what happened, and she said, no problem. So Emily did everything. So who in their bank would have done that? Everything. You bet. Raise your hands. You guys all, your team, all of them. Done everything. You would have closed those accounts. You would have looked up how many checks are outstanding. You would have asked me, had that conversation, figured out how much money needed to remain in the account, right? How many checks were outstanding. You would have looked at how many accounts those were connected to. Were they hooked up to online banking? You would have done everything for me just like Emily did for me and your customer, right? Everything. So all I had to do, she called me. She said, hey, Chris, all you and Andrew need to do is come in, run in the door, sign the papers, and scoot. I was in and out in under 3 minutes. Great customer service, right? Problem is, Emily didn't really engage with me. Now, she's lucky because she's my banker and I love her, and I'm not the normal customer, the normal branch customer, or the normal bank customer, because I work with banks all the time, community banks, so I support community banks all the time. So I tell Emily when something's going on, right? Like I'm selling a house or buying a house or need a mortgage or whatever. But she didn't really engage with me. She gave me great customer service, but she didn't engage with me about anything new going on in my life. And because I'm not really in the branch all that long, she could have taken that opportunity, maybe a little inconvenience to have me come in, but she could have, thought about some things and maybe asked me some questions and had me come into the branch, right? But still, I don't want to be negative because it was great customer service. She got it all done. She didn't get to talk to me much. And our whole environment is centered around us training our employees to do everything for the customer, right? Do everything well for the customer to provide great customer service. So in doing that, we are starting to limit our opportunity with people who actually come into the branch, right? Because they're not there that often. So if you take as an example just a normal deposit, and somebody's still coming in to make that deposit, what happens? Kelly's mom, didn't she use that example? She said her mom came into the bank, right? So Kelly's mom comes in, she gives the deposit over to the teller line scans the check, they input them out, give her the receipt, she's good to go, and she's made her deposit. Great customer service. If we keep transacting the same way in the bank, eventually, people like Kelly's mom and me and others older will not be coming into the bank anymore, and nobody will be coming into the bank. So we've got to look at doing transactions a bit differently. That's a typical transaction, right? She comes in, she hands over the check to the teller. Nice thing about community banks always, so I do, as part of my branch transformation studies, I do surveys of both the employees, customers, and executives, suite management, all participants within the bank, and their customers and some non-customers, but all get very high, typically under 90-second greeting to anybody coming into the branch. Even when there's not many employees in the branch, under 90 seconds. So big deal, right? Because I think there's nothing worse than coming into a location, you're not quite sure where you're going, or you don't feel like they care that you're there or happy that you actually came in. So kudos to community banks, because it's one of the few areas that actually does greet their customers, pretty quickly when coming into the branch. So we greeted her well. She walked up, she did the transaction. What else happened? She got a text on her phone, so that's probably not Kelly's mother. Now I think about it, she said she didn't have a smartphone. But she got a text on her phone, so she wasn't even paying attention to the teller. She probably said some nice things, and they know each other, right? She's a customer, so they probably talked about their family or, the weather, whatever, for a second. She got a text, but really there was no engagement in the branch, right, with this person other than to deposit the transaction. So what's wrong with that? Right? What's wrong with it? Isn't that what you trained all these years to do? Have people go, what's wrong with that? Right? Who's the retail people? I know there's a lot of marketing. Is there any retail person? Okay. Is your head exploding? Because you're like, yes, right? Her head explodes right now. Because she's like, that's what we want. We want them to come in. We want to do their transaction for them. We want them to be happy. We don't want them to have to worry about it. So it's funny because the retail people, executives of the bank always are like, Chris, like that, I can't remember the commercial where the guy's head turns purple. Oh, like a Verizon commercial or something, their head explodes. That's what happens to all the retail contacts. They're like, what's wrong with that? It's perfect. And it is perfect, right? If it were before, when so many people came in, remember, we couldn't wait to get the teller line to go faster, and we got more technology that made the check-in, check-out faster. But now we want them to stay a little longer. We never get to see them other than people like Kelly, Kelly's mom, who come there for social abilities. We want them to stay. We want to figure out what's going on in their life. What do they need from us, right? How can I sell them financial services if I don't know what they need? So that's what's wrong with that transaction. And so we have to foster a different engagement within our branch. So what type of engagement could it have been? So what do you think? Do you think you could do that? Have you done that in your branch? Very few. Very few. Do you think you could? Yeah? But again, Chris, we had this one person come in, and now you want me to tell her how to go away and not come in, right? You're making me nuts. Well, I get it. But in some ways, we have to help people use technology when they need to use technology, and then teach them other reasons to come into the branch, not just to make a transaction. Because whether they want to use technology or not, the next group is going to use technology. So if we don't have a way to engage our customer, then we're not going to get them in at all. And then it's all just going to be about rates and online and who has the prettiest website and all those different things, right? So although I didn't want, now it could have gone a different way. Like he could have asked her and she could have said, no, I don't want you to show me. And he, he's not going to wrestle her phone away and say, well, you're going to use our app, lady, Or she might have said, hey, I don't have that app. How do I even get that app? So then you have to think, okay, if I train my bank staff, my front line to do this, then there might have to be a place where you can take her over and download the app, right? If you're going to do that. And not all banks are set up for that. I mean, it's not like you always just walk into a bank and, oh, what's my Wi-Fi? You got Wi-Fi, right? It's not like it's Starbucks necessarily, where there's always Wi-Fi. So then you got to figure out how do you get Wi-Fi. You're technical people, and they say sometime in the year 2020, I'll get to that. But it really is something to think about. Could you do that in your branch? Could you change the engagement? Now, in that case, he wasn't spending a lot of time talking about services, but he was showing her new things about his bank. And how she could transact with the bank, which might give her more time to talk about something. I deposited a check the other day, and the teller at my bank, when I was there to get my passport out of the thing, I actually had a check, and we had sold a condo we had, and the teller was very smart. She said, this seems to be a good lump sum of money, do you have plans for it? We have a trust department. She talked to me about their trust department. I mean, it was like a perfect class example of what you want to happen in engagement. You had a teller that was very astute. She saw the transaction. Normally, I wouldn't have even been there. So that's a point, too. Who's looking at those deposits coming in through remote deposit capture? Because, trends are happening in those deposits. Things are happening in people's lifestyles that we're missing because they're not handing over the deposit to you. So you have to think about that as well. So this is where I say, remember we talked about all the great customer service at my bank and at your bank? This is where I say good self-service trumps great personal service. I hate that, but I have to say it, right? Good self-service trumps great personal service. So especially with the next generation, the millennial generation, if they can do something themselves versus you doing everything, they're going to do it themselves, even if it's okay. So I think Kelly's example of what McDonald's is piloting is a good example. 7 minutes to make your order. Holy camole, right? 7 minutes. Do you want the multigrain bread? Do you want this bread? Do you want whole wheat bread? Do you want white bread? They probably don't have white bread. Whatever. But 7 minutes, when the person who was trained, just like our tellers, right, could have done it in under a minute, right? What's your order? Boom, 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 got it, gone, right? But here, good self-service trumps great personal service, so we have to start thinking about it that way. We still want to be terrific to our customers that come in or talk to us online or however we communicate with them, but we have to make sure that they're capable of doing things in the self-service format, things that we don't have to do for them. And then that way we can spend time doing things we should be spending on time with them. So that means if that's the case, and we're going to teach them even more how to be more self-sufficient on transactions, what is it we're going to do in the branch, right? How are we going to make the branch more engaging? What are we going to do? Well, to be an engagement branch, you have to ask a lot of questions. To ask a lot of questions, you have to have people, right? So you have to have people coming in. So we do have to figure out how to get people into the branch, right? Once they're in the branch, we can ask a lot of questions like that teller asked of me. So we can ask a lot of questions that lead to insight. So she was asking about this check. I had sold a house, and I wasn't going to put it in trust because I was buying another house. Now, I personally would have gone to my bank anyway for a mortgage, but probably another customer might not. They might have shopped rates online. They might have, checked a bunch of different banks. I'm very loyal to my local bank, so I would go there for my mortgage anyway. In buying a house, and where I live, it's tricky because there's not a lot of housing, so the prices are inflated. But you still have to live somewhere, right? So you have to get a mortgage from your bank. So I would have done that anyway, but a lot of customers wouldn't have. So so we have to ask questions that lead to insights so we know what it is we're trying to sell. Once we know, okay, have a little information, then we can enable consultative selling, right? So it's not just about, here's the 15 checking accounts we have, right? It's about what type of products and services that I want to sell. It's not just about selling things that are good for the bank, but you still have to include that. I mean, you guys have to get paid and you have to make money. That's another thing about millennials. And I am speaking this afternoon on the whole millennial group segment. And, their positioning of whether they even need a bank, right? Do they even need a bank? So you have to enable consultative selling to be an engagement branch. And people prefer the branch when they want problem solving or education, right? Problem solving or education. So does anybody, I'm going to ask a different way. So part of my survey when I'm doing branch transformation is I ask a question, and it's not very open-ended, and then I ask an open-ended question in relationship. So I ask, okay, who does education in the branch? And usually a lot of people raise their hand, or on my survey they check, yes, we do education in the branch. Then I ask them what kind of education, and they don't really do customer education in the branch. They really don't. They don't do much of it at all. Occasionally, but it's not planned, and they don't have any classes or anything like that. And probably problem solving, they do a lot of problem solving. Usually has to do with, there's a mistransaction on their account, and my online banking doesn't work at all, or I can't pay a bill or something like that. So they do problem solving typically for that and for virtual bank transactions, probably very similar to your bank. So if we were going to try to get a different type of engagement branch, one of the things, or one of the ideas, is that we could maybe try to act like an Apple store, right? So has everybody been in an Apple store? Has anybody not? I should say, has anybody not? Okay. I live in a town that doesn't have an Apple store. It drives me crazy. So I have to drive an hour to Denver to go to the Apple store. So this will be helpful because I'll walk you through what an Apple store will be like. And I just went to our Apple store, and it was so cute. I walked into the mall, and I went to the Apple store this weekend. I had to drive down to Denver, went to the Apple store, and they had moved. And there was all these little cute little signs. I mean, sometimes I think that I love Apple, and they make everything so user-friendly, but sometimes I think they make it a little too helpful, right? Because there was steps literally from where the store used to be. all the way down to the other end of the mall. And little signs all along the way. We haven't left you. Come see us at our new space. So it was really funny. So it still looked like this part of the Apple Store looked the same. It was just bigger. Because for those of you who have not been in the Apple Store, it does not matter. When you go to the Apple Store, it's packed. It's packed all the time. Tuesday at 10, Monday at 3, Thursday at 5, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's crazy. It's packed all the time. But almost all of the Apple stores I've ever been in are very much the same, right? They have the same layout. So you walk into the Apple Store, and who's there? Their concierge comes up and has their little iPad, right? Comes up and has their little iPad and says, how can I help you today? Hey, having a great day? And they usually have like a red, or they all wear same color shirts. And the shirts designate what part of the store they work in most of the time. So I'm the concierge. So you walk in, hi, how are you? How can I help you today? And you might be there, you might have an appointment, or you might want to look at a new Apple Watch. I wasn't there to look at a new Apple Watch. I'll tell you why I was there in a minute. But I wanted to look at a new Apple Watch, and I had my daughter Paige with me. So I was like, hey, we have an appointment, but I also want to look at an Apple Watch. So she said, oh, well, what time's your appointment? She looked me up. She saw me. Okay, well, you're a little early. Great. So she took me over to this area, and what did we do? They showed me all their Apple Watches, right? There was a person there, and that person had a blue shirt on. And that person was like, hey, they come with 8,000 different color, like Kelly said, 8,000 different color bands, not just three for you, but 8,000 different color bands, faces, round, square, whatever you want. Does anybody have an Apple Watch? I don't either. I'm like, would I use it? I'm trying to figure it out. So I asked some of those, and they were great. The person was great, very knowledgeable. In the meantime, my daughter's like, Mom, whatever. She wanted the new i7 phone. She's 12. She wanted the new i7 phone. So she's a smart cookie, my daughter. So she's asking the guy, hey, is my mom's phone contract up? Can we get a new phone? Can we transfer that to, she does have a phone because she does all these extracurricular activities. So she does have a phone. And in 7th grade, which I said I wouldn't get her till 9th. So, okay, I already failed. She's 7th grade. But she's smart, right? She's like, hey, does my mom's phone, is it a time for an upgrade? Can I use that? And I'm like, no, I'm talking about the Apple Watch. And she's trying to distract the guy. So she went and gets her own guy, right? She was like, I don't need your guy. I can get my own guy. He's going to talk to me. And he did, right? He got it all figured out. She knew my number. He went online, looked at her, hey, your mom's got a upgrade coming up, And I was like, I'm going to use my own upgrade if anybody's going to use it. So first part is consultative selling, right? That's how that works in the Apple Store. Second part is education. Has anybody attended education in an Apple Store? Yeah, it's great. They run traditional classroom type classes at these tables. And they have you come in and you set up an appointment, or you don't have to, right? You just show up for the class. Sometimes the classes are full. It's crazy. But sometimes the class, and they can train you on anything Apple. Apple TV, my husband was like, hey, why don't we get that Apple TV? I decided I'm not the person to go learn about Apple TV, that he should be really the Apple TV guy. But, how to use the different phones, tablets, how to connect them to speakers, Wi-Fi, surround sound, blah, blah, blah. Education on apps, all different types of education that you can get at the Apple Store. It's awesome, It's really great. And then the third section, those are the guys I usually call the black shirts, right? The Genius Bar. And that is the problem-solving area, right? And they're the smartest, brightest Apple people. They're still people, because you can't have you can't go in your bank and get your computer guy, your technical guy downstairs to come up and help solve problems with people. If he's not a people person, he or she's not a people person, he still has to be able to talk to those people, right? So the Genius Bar, who's used the Genius Bar? I have. Oh my gosh, it's amazing, right? You're so frustrated at home, or you're on the phone and you're trying to use it, and you come in and they help you figure it out. So I was actually there because I had an appointment at the Genius Bar. Remember I said I wasn't really there to look at the Apple Watch, and I didn't buy one. I didn't buy one. But I was there because I had an appointment. So my daughter, the one who was looking at the upgrade, she dropped my phone and cracked my screen. That's why we were at the Apple store, okay? So I was there to get it. So you go in and you give them your phone. They're like, oh, Miss Peterson, here's your appointment. We'll take your phone. It should just take a couple minutes. Let's make sure your phone's backed up, you know, and then we're going to have to reset your password, blah, blah, blah. So they went away. Great. They took my phone, then we looked around a little bit more, and they relatively quickly, I mean, they pop it out and pop it in. They make sure everything underneath the actual screen is okay. And then they put the cover back on, and voila, they come back out. So what was great about this whole experience is, you know, I was here. I didn't really get any education, but I was here. But then when the Genius Bar expert came out, he said, you know, Chris, I think I should walk you back up here and have you talk to one of our team members, because you can buy a thing that goes right on your phone. It's on here right now, and it'll protect your screen so that typically if Paige drops it again, it won't break. So not only did they do, right, what I came in to do, but then they consultative sold me something that it's not cheap. It's not cheap. But, you know, it's cheaper because you know how it works with your phone. You only get, and then you have to pay $300. So it's not $300, it's like $68, and you pay for it. So, and they put it on right there. You don't have to do it. They put it on right there. But he actually was intuitive enough to say, hey, come over here. Let me reintroduce you to a team member. Chris really needs to know about this because she broke her screen phone and she doesn't want to do it again. Right? Very nice experience. So if you get a chance to go to the Apple store, that's kind of how it works, right? And then they have bazillions of things you can buy. This is a financial institution in Texas, and they transformed their location into more of an Apple store concept. Cool, huh? They took out, remember that desk? That desk where that person who used to work there no longer worked there at that desk? They took it out. They put some tables in, and they created a Genius Bar. And it's working for them. But it doesn't work for everybody. So I don't know if you heard of this, but the JCPenney CEO, he transformed the JCPenney stores into look more like an Apple store, right? So they actually put some iPads out so you could look at things online, and you could look at, because now most clothing stores, and this is true of JCPenney's, have online, they have outfits, right? They kind of making it easier for us. So they create a whole outfit, and you can look at those, and then you can say, I want this outfit. But it didn't really work, because although they changed it to look like an Apple store, they didn't retrain their employees. So their retail employees did the same thing they always did at JCPenney's. And it had nothing to do with consultative selling necessarily, you know, or have to do with education, or have to, you know, problem solving. There's always problem solving in retail too. So that's why he got fired, because it looked like an Apple store. It didn't act like an Apple store. So when you look like an engagement branch, you know, what could that be like for your institution, right? So let's think about that, and let's take a look. You would have consultative selling, right? How many of you have already had even training on consultative selling in your bank, right? Right? Sometimes you have to hire an outside consultant. This is a good area. Like, I'm a consultant, but I don't always like consultants, right? Because sometimes, like, there can be consulting that you don't really need, that people sell you on consulting, and it's crazy. You're totally educated. You totally know all this. You know, you might need somebody to help you structure the program, but you don't need tons of consulting. But consultative selling, that is a little bit of an art, right? And there is a methodology that goes with it. So if you are going to spend an area on training, this would be, I say, one of the areas that you spend your money is consultative training. And there's a lot of I don't do that, but there's a lot of companies that do that out there. But you could take that old desk that they finally had to wrench out of the CEO's hands and say, it's going on the curb because we are going to transform our branch, and we can physically transform our location, right? Physically transform it, and then we can start consultative selling. But you don't have to do all of that either. You don't have to redesign it. You could take out a couple desks and put in some tables. And you could put virtual devices. You could put virtual devices out there, different ones, and understand. You could do that so that your customers and prospects can look at the devices and how your app works on those devices. You can have some other apps on your devices, not bank apps, but apps that other people use. There's tons of payment apps that people use that, you might want to familiarize yourself with. But you could do consultative selling. You could have a demonstration area, right? You could have a demonstration area. You could show somebody how to do a remote deposit, just like they did in the video. You could do that. I go in the bank all the time. Nobody ever knows. One of the problems with the branch, very few people in the branch use all of the virtual services. Very few people in the branch. Why? Because it's so easy. They work at the bank. They don't have to do all of those transactions online and virtually because they're there every day, right? But I'm not, so you should be able to show me how to use the different devices, how to do a remote deposit on different types of phones, handhelds and mobile phones. How can I use my credit card in your wallet, right? That's a very confusing thing to figure out the whole wallet situation on mobile phones. So you might have consultative selling with demonstrations of that functionality. You have to retrain your CSRs, no question about that, right? And most of them have been retrained to be more of a generalist, which is okay, but they have to be more specific about your services, right? They have to be more intuitive about asking questions. They have to be more consultative selling and focus on what? What did Kelly tell us? The benefit, the customer benefit, right? So we want to focus on the benefits of using your services. And you want to have an area of self-service where they can actually perform those transactions by themselves, right? So whether that's some sort of kiosk setup or iPads or Macs or whatever you do. So let's look at the animation again in a different environment. Okay, different type of branch environment, right? I meet with many CEOs and board of directors and strategic planning committees, and I have shown that video. And what do you think the first thing the CEO says to me? It's really loud in that branch. Really loud, right? Really loud in that. It's funny, branches have gotten very quiet. They've gotten so quiet, right? And we've gotten used to that, and maybe that's something, we have to start looking at too. Why is it so quiet in our branch? So, as I'm a customer, I come into your branch, it's so quiet. Sometimes I feel going into banks, and I go into more banks that aren't mine because of what I do for a living, and sometimes I feel like I was invited to the party, right? Party started at 7:30, and it's already 8:15, and I show up, and I'm the second person there. And all I can think of is, how do I get out of here so fast? So noise is not necessarily a bad thing, right? And education, right? What if we did education in our branch? How can we do education? We can have regularly scheduled classes. If you're trying to get to millennials, right, you can target some of the education. You know what millennials are interested in? Investments and retirement. Isn't that crazy? Investments, right? They want to invest. The difference for millennials, and I'll talk about this more later on today in my second presentation, but they want to consume our products and services differently than we want them to be consumed by them. So we'll talk about that a little bit this afternoon. Open it to prospects, right? Why does it even have to be a customer? Is there a certain commercial segment of your town, the marketplace, that you're trying to bring over? You can bring in a speaker to talk to commercial customers, right? It doesn't even have to be somebody in your bank. Now, I guarantee you there's great people in your bank, but you can get a speaker that can come in, give them a little cocktail or a little lunch, right? And they'll come. They love to come. So, create specific targeting sessions and make them fun and informative sessions, right? You want them to be upbeat, not so quiet. They can't be so quiet. They want to actually, engage with you. Customers and millennials in particular want to engage with you. So you could do education on how to, right? How to education. How do you use these products and services? How do you actually, make a remote deposit? How do I pay a bill online? How do I use Quicken? I don't know, this whole data transfer thing is still confusing. Or should I use the cloud, and is it safe, right? Those are all things you could do. You could do, why are there monthly service fees? I'm telling you, when you hear my millennial presentation, you will not run out of things of education to do in your branch. That is one thing. You want to create an open and friendly environment and encourage participation. You can't make people feel silly or stupid for asking a question. That's both your employees and the customer or prospect, right? Your employees have to feel safe. They want to be able to move and transition to this new type of branch environment. You got to help them, and you got to let them know that they're not going to be embarrassed. They're not going to embarrass themselves, and they will make mistakes. You could target the sessions, and don't give up, because you know what? It's going to take time, right? It took us 100 years to create all these wonderful branches, hundreds of years to create these branches, and to train our employees and to get it done right. And we have mastered the art of, Community Bank, in my opinion, has mastered the art of great personal service. They really have, right? I wouldn't say that about necessarily, bigger banks. I mean, there are some big banks that do it well, and there are some investment firms that do it well. But the Community Bank has mastered great personal service. And so now we have to transition. So don't give up. It's going to take time. You don't have to do it all at once. Don't start knocking. Don't go back and say, hey, I listened to Chris today, and you know what? Let's knock down these walls and, reconfigure our whole. You don't have to do that. But there are banks that are doing that. And I would encourage you to get with the people who raise their hand about doing the transformation now and see what they're doing, how they're starting. So, oopsie, education in the branch. Problem solving, this is my favorite. You guys could knock it out of the park at problem solving, right? You could absolutely knock it out of the park, because people don't know how to use all these services well, especially things like how to use your app in combination with another app, how to use, when you do the update, it did something to my app. So you could have a setup like this where you would have your black shirts. You could have commercial and retail help, right? If somebody's new to ACH or all the new, my bank just sent me, this is perfect. My bank just sent me a new notification saying that they were gonna, I should have put it on the screen, that they were going to reorder my transactions. So they are gonna post those transactions as they take place. I didn't know my bank could do that, right? Because I know what computer system they're on Jack Henry, so I'm trying to, are they, so I guess they're going to go ahead and post them in the order of the payment being made electronically versus coming in, how the payment's penned all day long, the ACH file, and they put them in at night. They are going to post those payments as they get them, which that's not happening. I mean, does your bank do that? I haven't known banks to do that in the past. They put them all in. They give me the memo post credit, right? But they're actually, I don't know how they're doing it, but it's kind of cool. So they're doing education. They said, if you need help understanding what we're doing, so I'm going to go for different reasons, right? So I can tell all of you. But if you need help, we'll have an education session. They list the education sessions on how to do it. So problem solving, educational help. You could allow for specific appointments. You could have your own Geek Squad. Right? You guys are the marketing people. You could name it whatever you want to name it, but you could actually have your own branding of what, big box retailers have as the Geek Squad for your bank, and brand it as something else. That'd be really exciting. And you know what? You already have your Genius Bar. It's your teller line, right? So you could literally not break down any of the walls, but you could break those down. Right? You could break those down and do things a little differently. Update the teller line, use it more as a Genius Bar to go through. Right? So, barriers to success, there's tons of barriers. Right? General ledger, branch manager, compensation, management focus, biggest one, management focus. I would also say that in all the studies I do, typically 30% of the employees and the management are not in favor of transformation. 30%, right? So they won't convert to engagement. They want to do the same transaction they always did. So you have to retrain them. You have to require everybody to use the virtual branch and all of their services, right? You enable consultative selling. You provide a safe environment for mistakes, right? And if you can't retrain, you might have to move some people around or hire some new staff, right, with people who want to. Because there's always naysayers. There's going to be naysayers in your bank, and you got to find out who they are. There's people who will say, it won't work. I don't care what you tell me, Chris. I don't care. It's not going to work. We're going to scare away all our baby boomers, which is where the money is. Okay, you're going to run out of time if you don't have a different plan. But there's always naysayers. You got to root them out. You got to try and convert them. And if you can't, right, then you have to make sure everybody's on board, not overboard one way or the other, right? So switching to your focus, if you're really serious about branch engagement, is really to switch to engagement focus versus transaction focus. It's about changing attitudes from the top. So you got to find those 30% that don't want the transformation, and they cannot lead these projects, and sometimes they're the people that banks put in charge of the project, right? They can't lead it. You got to find different people to lead it. Retrain and rehire, and strategically plan for success. So I'm excited to hear about your transformations. Maybe you can share some of that with the group regarding how it's going for you guys. Did you find a lot of the same things within you? Yeah, you did? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that concludes my presentation for this morning.